So unlike a seminar, you know, let's take Nexium. Nexium was a seminar selling company that did self-help, motivational kind of seminars. People would go off, they'd do a 13, 14-day intensive, they would be assigned a coach, they would go through a training process that was dictated by a manual. And behind all of this was Keith Raniere, who they called Vanguard. What the difference is...
It's from Nexium.
Yeah, this is the leader of Nexium, which really was congregating around Albany, New York. And Raniere would eventually be arrested, tried for sex trafficking, fraud, various things, and now he's in prison for 120 years. But when the people became involved, they had no idea what Raniere's darker intentions were, where he really wanted to take them. They thought it was like other self-help groups, motivational speakers, etc. Where it changed was it became more and more demanding, and it became a complete way of life. In other words, you don't just come here and learn what we have to teach you and then take it home and then use it and goodbye and get on with your life. We become your life. We consume your life. We expect you to move to Albany, New York, so that you can be close to Vanguard, Keith Raniere. We want you to recruit people, and if anyone in any way, shape, or form is criticizing what we're teaching, we want you to cut them off, disconnect from them. And so that's very different than a Tony Robbins or some type of motivational speaker. Tony Roberts certainly has his critics, but I don't think anyone would say that, you know, he has a compound. People have given up their lives to be with him and live near him, and that their life becomes completely controlled by him.
Got it. Yeah, I just found a clip of his most recent thoughts he shared before he went away, sentenced to 120 years in prison. Is this it, Rob?
Yes.
Can you go back to the one you just had? I just want to know how the guy speaks. What's his tone, the way he speaks? Can you press play?
They called him Vanguard, the founder of Nexium, a shadowy self-help organization described by federal prosecutors as cult-like. Keith Raniere has not spoken publicly since his arrest more than 2 years ago. But now, just days from being sentenced on federal charges, he is talking.
You know, one of the things that's most important in our country is the justice system. And although, you know, people can hate me and do and think I'm an odious type of a character, you know, awful actually. Both the devil and the saint should be able to get the exact same treatment under our justice system.
Today, Raniere spoke with, of all people, the man who helped bring him down, web journalist Frank Parlato, a former Nexium spokesman. Parlato himself has pleaded not guilty to tax and other charges that originated from his Nexium involvement.
You plan out 14 steps ahead.
If you have seen the HBO docuseries The Vow, Parlato's name may ring a bell. Parlato broke the story that a group within Nexium was treating women as sex slaves and branding them with Raniere's initials.
You gotta be kidding.
Raniere was convicted in 2019 of sex trafficking, forced labor conspiracy, and racketeering.
Do you intend to make a statement at your sentencing that you are innocent?
Yes, I am innocent. And although this is a horrible tragedy.
We can pause it right there. You've spent a lot of time with Keith.
Oh, yeah.
How many hours have you spent with Keith?
Many hours. I sat through his deposition. He sued me. Interesting story. Basically, I deprogrammed people that were involved in Nexium, 4 families. I worked with victims, and I facilitated reports being written by a clinical psychologist and a forensic psychiatrist analyzing the seminar training that Keith Raniere used, which, by the way, he ripped off Scientology. He was really a plagiarist because many of the things that he taught were lifted directly from Scientology. For example, calling people that were critical of Nexium suppressive people or suppressive persons.
SPs.
SPs, urging people to disconnect from SPs. This was right out of Scientology. So Raniere, what he did was he put together something that took a little bit from landmark education and seminar structure.
That was from 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Landmark and PSI, and there was a couple programs like that back in the days. And they would call you at the end crying, "I'm so sorry what I did to you." And I'm like, why is this person calling me? I'm at this thing called Landmark Forum, and I just really messed up. I should have never said that. Please, you just took me back 30 years, 25 years.
Landmark just recently went bankrupt, but they were ongoing up until very recently. And by the way, they also sued me and lost. But the point is that Raniere was not an original thinker. He cobbled together, and many cult leaders do this. They copy other groups. They may have been in another group before they created their own. And so what you end up with is a composite. Raniere's composite was a little bit Landmark, Scientology, Ayn Rand, the philosophy of objectivism, and the multi-level marketing he learned as an Amway distributor. And later he created his own MLM called Consumer Byline, which was sued out of existence by attorney generals of various states. Raniere was soft-spoken. He seemed like an introvert. He lied about his background. He was a genius. He was a stellar student at university.
Did he say he had like a 240 IQ or something like that?
The man,
he had a 2.26 GPA.
The man was an average student. This came out in deposition and sworn testimony. He lied about all that. So what he really was not a very smart guy, because he ended up in prison for 120 years. He could have done a correction along the way and avoided that. Instead, like many cult leaders, he fed on his adulation, and it led to a kind of hubris and arrogance that ultimately meant that he kept escalating his bad behavior, hurting more and more people, thinking he could get away with it forever, and eventually he was held accountable. And I would agree with him. He is odious. He is a very negative person. But the way he projected himself was as a kind of philosopher king, quiet, soft-spoken, not the brash, charismatic kind of extroverted cult leader that you typically see. But he was able to pull people in, and the people who were pulled in they went through intensive after intensive after intensive. So by the time the women were branded, and there were quite a few of them that were branded with a cauterizing iron and no anesthetic, and Keith Raniere would watch remotely. And these women, they had been through so much by the time that event occurred that you have to rewind it and understand that this took years of what we would call brainwashing before they reached that point. And in fact, it was a medical doctor, a DO, that eventually lost her license that did the branding with the cauterizing iron. And she was that caught up in Raniere's alternate reality. And of course, you had the actress Allison Mack, and she was brought in by another actress, Kristen Kruk, from the series Smallville. And these were successful women who had very good careers and thought that Nexium would improve their lives. And then I worked with Catherine Oxenberg, who is best known from the series Dynasty in the 80s. And her daughter, India Oxenberg, was also brought into the group. And at that time, Catherine Oxenberg's husband, Casper Van Diem, also went to some of the training. But eventually, Catherine and Casper Van Diem would drop out of Nexium. But the problem was India was still in. And she would eventually be branded and go through a horrible...
She was branded?
Yes. and she would go through a horrible process of being separated from her family, turned against her family, incommunicado. And Frank Parlato, by the way, was originally hired by Keith Raniere as a kind of fixer and PR guy. I think, as I recall, part of what his job was to deal with me. And let me backtrack and say that there were these two doctors, a clinical psychologist, a forensic psychiatrist, who wrote 3 reports about Nexium that were withering in their analysis. I put that online and published it. That is why Raniere sued me. He wanted to shut down any kind of discussion of his training online. He wanted me to remove those reports. And I refused to do that. And he sued me for 14 years. And eventually that suit was dismissed, and then subsequently he was arrested. In fact, I testified at his trial.
You testified at his trial?
Yes, I did.
Have you had a one-on-one conversation with him?
Oh, yes. We went through what's called court-ordered mediation. The lawsuit was in federal court, and the federal judge ordered that we get together and try to negotiate a settlement. And I'm telling you, that was an interesting experience, sitting with a cult leader trying to negotiate a settlement from this harassment lawsuit. And I can remember that very well.
What vibes did he give you? Like, think movie characters. Like, when you think about movie characters, the character Kaiser Sose from The Usual Suspects, right? I don't know if you know Kaiser Sose in the movie Usual Suspect. Think about, Edward Norton from Primal Fear. What character can you tell us what he was like when you were negotiating with him?
I don't know. He was like he's a very short guy. I mean, I'm not very tall. I'm 5'7", and he was quite a bit shorter than me. Not impressive at all. And by the way, he literally stank. I mean, the guy didn't...
Stank?
Yeah.
Like smelled?
He smelled bad. He wasn't too big on showers. He was ill-kept. He was an odd guy, and he tried to come across as a deep thinker, very quiet. But when he was confronted, he would blow up. So what happened in the negotiations that we had was he kept running his philosophy, which is called rational inquiry, which is a bunch of junk that he used to subdue people, their critical thinking. And he kept throwing that out at me and saying, you don't understand, listen to this, listen to that. And I looked at him at one point and I said, look, Keith, I don't care what you believe. I'm not interested. What I'm here to do is court-ordered mediation and settlement. And that's what we're here for. And he would keep starting up. And finally, I looked at him and I said, Keith, what I think is you're a cult leader and you brainwash people and you're destructive and you hurt people, and that's who you are. And nothing you say is going to change.
What do you say to that?
He kind of blew up. He got very red-faced. His voice shook. And he was very upset. And I could tell that in the bubble that he inhabited, where no one ever criticized him, that was just, that was the cardinal sin. So he went directly from that into a deposition in which he was asked many questions about his life, his past. By the way, those depositions are now online. And I also met Nancy Salzman, who was the second in command of Nexium.
Can you hold that thought? This is a clip I found of Keith from 1980s. I just want to know how this guy speaks. Can you play this clip, Rob?
What is Pac-Man fever and who's likely to get it? Now, just about anyone. Pac-Man has come out of the video.
What does this have to do with Keith Raniere, Rob? Do you know? Is he about to come up? Fast forward a little bit. See if he's anywhere there. Right there. Okay, let's see it.
From RPI, Keith Raniere, who has scored over 2 million points with a single Pac-Man.
This is like the Rubik Cube to a certain extent. A lot of people play it just competitively, but it's actually like a puzzle.
And because the game appeals to women,
that was him.
version on the scene.
What a... So, okay.
Yeah.
Seems like a regular guy.
I don't know about that.
In that?
I mean, there were stories that were reported about Keith Raniere harassing little girls and terrorizing them at the age of 10. So I think that, in my opinion, and I think, this can be borne out, he was really bad from a very early age. He was harassing people, terrorizing people, manipulating people.
What do we know about his parents?
From what I gathered, they were pretty good people. And he would at times imply that he was somehow an abused kid, that he had suffered and whatever. But in reality, from what I gathered from talking to people that knew the family, he had nice parents, his father in particular. And so you could argue that this man is a psychopath. I think mental health professionals would see him as that, and that he was born that way, perhaps. It's in his DNA, as they say, bad to the bone. And many of the cult leaders that I've dealt with over the years, they seem to be that way. They seem to form a pattern where they're insensitive to the suffering of others, they're incapable of empathy, and when they hurt people, they just don't feel anything.
Interesting.
And that their idea of right and wrong is what's good for me is right, and what's wrong is what's bad for me. So do what I tell you and cooperate with me to give me what I want, and you're good, and we're good. But otherwise, it's bad. And so that's how Keith Raniere was. Was he obsessed with video games, whatever? I mean, what came out in his deposition was he never really had a real job. He was either a student or he was running an MLM. He was always taking advantage of people.
What MLMs was he in? Who was Amway? What else was he with?
He was an Amway distributor, is my understanding, and then he created his own MLM called Consumer Byline. And it was a scam, and that's why it went under. And then he created Nexium with Nancy Salzman, his second in command. And Salzman was a nurse. She had a background in what's called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP.
Yep.
And she shared that with Raniere, and together they designed his training, which I think anyone who reads through the manual and looks at the study notes will recognize a pattern of coercive persuasion and manipulation that is evident in the way the course curriculum was designed from the very beginning. So Salzman knew that, though she might argue today that she's a victim. I don't see Nancy Salzman as a victim. In fact, when they raided her house, they found $500,000 in cash in the house. To me, if you have that much money stashed, you're not really a victim. You're a co-conspirator. And Nancy Salzman would eventually go to prison for withholding information in the lawsuit against me, which is a crime in a federal lawsuit. And also they would find files in her basement of the perceived enemies of Nexium, including me. And I saw this file when I testified in the criminal trial of Keith Raniere. They showed it to me. Did you know they had a file on you? And
on you?
Yeah, and they showed
This
me.
is very similar to Scientology, so far what you're saying. Every time I've interviewed somebody that said something bad about Scientology, I've gotten an email and a website about why that person's wrong and history of that person's wrongdoing over their lifetime, whatever it is.
That's their dead agent file. That's what it's called.
For a Scientology?
In Scientology, if they put together a file on a perceived enemy, it's called your dead agent file. I think mine is hundreds of pages long. It's been thrown around.
So you're famous in Scientology.
Well, I'm certainly considered an SP. I've been labeled an SP for
not good.
For decades, yeah. And
you're a troublemaker. It's to them. That's not.
And their lead counsel, Kendrick Moxon, and I have crossed swords in court. So I think, Scientology is an example of a group that goes after its enemies. Keith Raniere, I think, learned from that example.
Did they ever meet? Does he have any? I just tapped right in. If there's any affiliation, there's nothing connected between the two.
I have been told that one of the inner circle in Nexium was a former Scientologist. And I was also told that at one time when Keith Raniere was suing me, he exchanged ideas or thoughts or had some kind of input from Scientology in regards to going after me. Certainly, my dead agent file was used by Nexium. And by the way, Nexium had me under surveillance. At one point, they were actually buying my garbage in a building that I lived in.
That's Scientology.
Well, very similar. And they went into my banking records and phone records. And I would eventually sue and settle with the PI company that was hired by Nexium. So, you know, Nexium was, they were brutal. They were very insidious in the way that they went after people. But let me just share this. The key to understanding Nexium is that Keith Raniere was able to recruit 2 heirs to the Seagram's liquor fortune, and that is Claire and Sarah Bronfman. These sisters reportedly gave Keith Raniere over $100 million.
Stop it.
Yeah. When he was arrested, there were...
Her?
Yes.
She looks like somebody that would waste that money.
Well, she went to prison for almost 7 years over Nexium.
That's a terrible mugshot. Is that a mugshot or is that just a picture? Can you see if that's a mugshot, Rob?
Doesn't say down here.
Oh, she...
To be honest with you, I think that's kind of a flattering picture because I've...
Stop it.
Yeah, because I've seen Claire Bronfman.
You met her?
Yeah. I didn't meet her face-to-face, but at another court-ordered mediation, she was there representing Nexium. She was an officer of Nexium, the corporation. And she was scurrying around, talking to different mediators, former federal judges, trying to follow through on whatever Raniere's plan was at that mediation. But she really was a pawn of Raniere for years and years and went to prison for 7 years. And to this day, I think she would still say positive things about Keith Raniere. Hi, I'm Rick Allen Ross, cult expert, intervention specialist, author of the book Cults Inside Out. You can find me on Connect.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.